The morning began with the familiar creaking of the floorboards. I slowly moved my feet across the old parquet flooring, which my late husband Richard had refused to replace during the last 15 years of our life together. "This floor will outlive us all, Vermilion," he would say, stroking the wood with his gnarled fingers. And he was right. The floor outlived him by 3 whole years. I reached for the curtains and pulled them back in one swift motion. Wichita greeted me with a gray sky and a deserted street. A neighbor boy was riding his bike down the sidewalk, the only movement in the frozen landscape. At 67, you begin to appreciate moments of silence like this, when no one demands your attention or tells you what to do. Our house, now mine, stood on the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, too big for a single widow. But every corner held memories of 40 years of life. This is where Empire, our only daughter, was born and raised. This is where Richard built a cabinet for his collection of antique pocket watches. This is where we celebrated our silver wedding anniversary, and then I sat by his bedside as pancreatic cancer took him away piece by piece. I went into the kitchen and put the kettle on. My morning routine had remained unchanged for years. Tea with a spoonful of honey, toast with peanut butter, a page of crossword puzzles from yesterday's newspaper. After breakfast, I began cleaning. The dust cloth glided over surfaces, collecting particles invisible to the eye. I polished the wooden furniture until it shone, although no one but me noticed the difference. In the afternoon, I usually read or knitted. Today, my fingers reached for the unfinished sweater for Empire, dark blue with a Norwegian pattern. I had started it last winter, but every time my daughter visited, she would grimace at my work. "Mom, who wears things like that nowadays? You'd better buy me something decent." The needles froze in my hands. Why do I keep knitting this? The doorbell rang at exactly 3 o'clock. Empire always came on Wednesdays, as if fulfilling an obligation she had imposed on herself. I hurried to open the door, fixing my hair and pulling down my blouse. "Mom, did you forget to get a haircut again?" That was the first thing my daughter said as she crossed the threshold. Tall, slender, with perfectly straight dark hair and sharp brown eyes, she was so unlike me, soft and round, with perpetually tousled gray curls. "Hello, dear. I have an appointment next week." I lied. I hadn't made an appointment, but it was the easiest way to avoid a lecture on how important it is to take care of yourself, even at my age. Empire walked into the living room, taking off her coat as she went and casually throwing it on the sofa. I hurried to pick up the garment and hang it on a hanger. God, it's dusty in here again. "Mom, do you ever dust the shelves?" She ran her finger along the bookcase and pointed it out to me demonstratively. "I was just cleaning this morning," I muttered, feeling my throat tighten. Why did I always make excuses to her, like a naughty child? "You need a housekeeper. This house is too big for you alone." I said nothing as I prepared tea on a tray. The porcelain set that Richard and I had received as a wedding gift clinked in my trembling hands. "How's work?" I asked, placing the cups on the coffee table. Empire worked at an insurance company in some important position. She rarely shared details, but always emphasized how much she earned. "Everything's fine. Unlike some people, I don't sit at home all day sorting through old things." She took a sip of tea and grimaced. "It's too sweet. You know I'm watching my figure." "I'm sorry, dear." I reached for her cup. "Leave it." She waved her hand. "Tell me what you're doing with Dad's things. It's time to sort through his wardrobe." I clenched my fingers around the cup handle so hard that my knuckles turned white. "I'm not ready yet." "Mom, it's been 3 years. It's not healthy to live among the belongings of a dead man." I flinched at the word dead. Richard was never just a body that had stopped breathing to me. He was my compass, my anchor in this world. Without him, I felt like a boat adrift on the open sea. I'm doing it gradually, I said, looking out the window at the maple tree we had planted the year Empire was born. Back then, it was a fragile sapling. Now, it was a mighty tree. You need to think about the future, not the past. Empire took out her phone and started scrolling through her messages. By the way, I saw a great nursing home on the west side of town yesterday. Very modern, with medical care. I froze with my cup to my lips. A nursing home? But I'm doing just fine on my own. Empire rolled her eyes. You call that doing fine? The house is dusty. You eat who knows what. You forget to take your medicine. I don't forget to take my medicine, I protested, but my voice sounded uncertain. You're 67, Mom. You have to be realistic. This house requires constant care, and you don't have the strength anymore. I was silent. What could I say? That I polish the floors every day until they shine? That I keep the garden in perfect order? That I remember which medicine to take and when? Empire wouldn't believe me anyway. She didn't see me as a person, but as a problem that needed to be solved. Okay, I have to go, Empire said, getting up without finishing her tea. I have another meeting at 6. She grabbed her coat and purse. Think about what I said. A nursing home is a great solution. Plus, you won't have to spend money on maintaining this. She gestured around the living room, searching for the right word. Museum. I walked her to the door. I used to wipe this girl's tears, teach her to ride a bike, read her bedtime stories. Now she looked at me as if I were a burden. Call me if you need anything, Empire said as she got into her car. I nodded and waved. She never kissed me goodbye. Returning to the house, I stopped at the mirror in the hallway. Wrinkles around my eyes, gray hair, slumped shoulders. Did I really look so helpless? In the reflection, I saw a woman who had always put the needs of others above her own. First my parents, then my husband, then my daughter. I had always been a quiet harbor, never a storm. I went into the bedroom and opened Richard's closet. His clothes were still hanging there, neatly ironed, with lavender sachets between the shirts. I ran my hand over the fabric, inhaling the fading scent of his cologne. You never knew how to stand up for yourself, Vermilion, my husband often said to me, shaking his head. He loved me, but deep down, it seems he despised me a little for my softness. Richard was a man of action, an engineer who knew how to solve problems and never let others tell him how to live his life. I closed the closet and walked over to the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Down on the street, an elderly couple walked hand in hand. They looked happy, as if the years had not dried up their love, but only strengthened it. I watched them until they disappeared around the corner. Suddenly, I felt unbearably stuffy in this house full of memories. I threw open the window, letting the evening breeze rush into the room. It fluttered the curtains and turned the pages of an open book on the nightstand. What would Richard say if he saw how our daughter treated me? What advice would he give? Don't let her walk all over you, Vermilion. You deserve respect. I sat down on the bed, still looking out the window. Maybe Empire was right. Maybe this house really was too big for me. But the thought of a nursing home filled me with horror. I had seen those places, with their sterile corridors, the smell of medicine, and the constant hum of televisions in the common rooms. It wasn't life, just a pale shadow of it. No, I wasn't ready to give up. I wasn't ready to let Empire decide my fate as if I were incapable. I looked at Richard's photo on the bedside table. His smile, captured on film 20 years ago, still warmed my heart. What should I do, Richard? I asked the photo, not expecting an answer. The silence of the house enveloped me. Through the open window came the sound of passing cars, children's laughter from the neighboring yard, a dog barking. Life went on out there, and I was stuck here among the ghosts of the past. My gaze fell on the rocking chair in the corner of the bedroom. I had breastfed Empire in it, and I had sat in it all night long when she had a fever. How many hours had I spent rocking in that chair, dreaming that my little girl would grow up to be a happy, confident woman? And this is what she had become: cold, calculating, seeing me only as a burden. I walked over to the dresser and opened the top drawer. There lay my jewelry box, few pieces, but dear to my heart. A silver bracelet from my parents for my 16th birthday. A pearl necklace given to me by Richard on our wedding day. A brooch in the shape of a swallow, which I bought myself after Empire was born. I took out the brooch and pinned it to my blouse. The tiny bird sparkled in the light, as if it had come to life. Something changed in me at that moment. The quiet voice inside me that always said, "Give in, don't argue, accept," suddenly sounded different. "It's time," it said. "It's time to change something." Wednesday turned into Thursday, and then Friday. The days passed as usual. I was still thinking about Empire's words. Nursing home. Those words sounded like a sentence. No, I couldn't agree to that. On Friday, I decided to go to the supermarket for groceries. It was a cloudy but warm day. The autumn wind blew fallen leaves along the sidewalks, and the air smelled like rain. I put on a light coat and tied a silk scarf around my neck, a small tribute to elegance that I never strayed from. The Delori supermarket was a 15-minute walk from my house. I hadn't driven a car in 5 years. After Richard died, my eyesight began to fail, and I decided not to take any chances. Empire, of course, saw this as yet another sign of my helplessness. The produce section greeted me with bright colors and the smell of freshness. I was picking out apples when I heard a familiar voice. "Vermilion? Vermilion Sibley, is that you?" I turned around and couldn't believe my eyes. Standing in front of me was Bridget Flynn, my best friend from school. We hadn't seen each other in probably 10 years, ever since she moved to California to be with her son after her husband died. "Bridget," I dropped the apple in surprise. "What brings you here?" She laughed and hugged me, strong, energetic, with a short haircut and bright lipstick. "I came to visit my brother. He still lives in that ramshackle house on River Street." "My goodness, Vermilion, you haven't changed a bit." That was an outright lie. Unlike me, Bridget looked younger than her age, tanned with a lively sparkle in her eyes and straight posture. "You've gotten prettier," I replied sincerely. "California clearly suits you." We decided to have coffee in a small cafeteria next to the supermarket. Bridget ordered an espresso. I ordered tea with milk. Just like old times. "So, what's new in your life?" I asked, stirring sugar into my cup. Bridget smiled, and wrinkles gathered at the corners of her eyes. "Oh, where to start? After Frank died, I thought my life was over. I moved in with my son and looked after my grandchildren. Then I realized I was going crazy inside those four walls." She took a sip of espresso and continued. "At 63, I decided it was time for a change. I signed up for photography classes. Then I bought a van and converted it into a mobile home. And I set off on a journey through the national parks." I listened to her with my mouth open. Bridget, who had always been a homebody, had suddenly turned into an adventurer. "Are you traveling alone?" I asked incredulously. "At first, yes. Then I met a group of fellow retired nomads. We traveled all over the West: Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, Yosemite. I took pictures and wrote a blog. Can you believe I even have followers?" She laughed, as if she couldn't believe it herself. "And last year I went to Mexico. I always dreamed of seeing the Day of the Dead. Oh, Vermilion, it was magical. All those candles, flowers, music." I looked at my friend and didn't recognize her. This wasn't the Bridget who baked cookies with me for school fairs and discussed department store sales. What about fear? I asked quietly. Aren't you scared to be alone in a foreign place? Bridget took my hand. Of course I'm scared. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night in my van, somewhere in a remote parking lot, and think, God, what am I doing? But then I go outside, see the starry sky, and realize that fear is just another emotion, like joy or sadness. It comes and goes. The main thing is not to let it control your life. Her words touched something deep inside me. Wasn't my whole life dictated by fear? Fear of disappointing my parents, losing my husband's love, upsetting my daughter. I always chose safety, never took risks. Are you happy, Bridget? I asked. She thought for a moment, then nodded. You know, after 60, I finally realized that happiness is not a permanent state. It's moments. Sunrise over the canyon, a conversation with a stranger who becomes a friend, the taste of an exotic fruit. I collect these moments, and yes, overall, I am happy. For the first time in my life, I am doing what I want, not what I should. We talked for another 2 hours. Bridget showed me photos on her phone, mountains, lakes, ancient temples in the jungle. In one photo, she was standing on the edge of a cliff, her arms outstretched as if she were about to fly. How are you, Vermilion? What have you been doing since Richard left? She finally asked. I opened my mouth and closed it. What could I say? That I dusted an empty house? That I knitted sweaters that no one wore? That I lived on memories? I'm coping, I finally managed. Empire visits me often. The house needs looking after. Bridget looked at me intently with her clear eyes. What about yourself, Vermilion? What are you doing for yourself? I was silent, not knowing how to answer. Listen. She took my hand again. I know it sounds cliché, but it's never too late to start living. Not just existing, but actually living. Frank liked to say, we don't rehearse life, we live it right now. Richard could have said the same thing. Bridget was right. Richard always lived life to the fullest. Unlike me, he didn't put off his dreams until later. We exchanged phone numbers and promised to meet the next day. I finished shopping and headed home with a heavy bag and even heavier thoughts. In the evening, Empire called. Her voice sounded unusually excited. Mom, I have news. She didn't even say hello. Oaks proposed to me. We're getting married this spring. Oaks Tensey had been her boyfriend for the past 2 years. A tall man with a permanently furrowed brow and a habit of looking at his watch during conversations. He worked at the same insurance company as Empire, only in a higher position. Congratulations, dear, I said. I'm very happy for you. We're having the engagement party in 2 weeks at Laurel Gardens. You'll come, of course. Just please wear something decent. And do your hair. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Of course, dear. I'll look decent. Great. Empire's voice sounded impatient. Oaks wants to talk to you about something important. We'll stop by tomorrow. She hung up without waiting for my answer. I put down the phone and sat down in a chair. Empire is getting married, my little girl. I should have felt happy, but for some reason I only felt anxious. The next day, I met Bridget in the park. We walked along paths strewn with fallen leaves, and she continued to tell me about her adventures, about scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef, about spending the night in the desert under the open sky, about how she learned to cook authentic Thai food from an old woman in a mountain village. Next month, I'm flying to Italy, she said, as we sat down on a bench by the pond. I'm renting a cottage in Tuscany, a bottle of wine, sunset over the vineyards. Come with me, Vermilion. I laughed, thinking she was joking. I'm serious. Bridget looked at me without smiling. You need to break out of this cocoon, see the world, feel alive. I can't, Bridget. I shook my head. Empire is engaged. She's getting married. So what? She's a grown woman. She'll survive without you for a couple of weeks. You don't understand. She, she and Oaks want to discuss something with me. Something important. Bridget snorted. I bet they want you to pay for their wedding. Empire makes good money, I argued. She doesn't need my money. Maybe, Bridget shrugged. But everyone wants more than they have. That's human nature. I was silent, staring at the pond. Ducks glided across the dark water, leaving concentric circles behind them. Just don't let them manipulate you, Vermilion, Bridget said quietly. You've lived a good life, raised a daughter. Now it's your time. Time to live for yourself. That evening, Empire and Oaks arrived. She was wearing an elegant ivory suit. He was wearing a dark gray suit with a matching tie. They looked like a couple from the cover of a business magazine. Mom, Empire kissed me on the cheek. Do you remember Oaks? Of course. I held out my hand to her fiancé. Nice to see you, Oaks. He shook my hand, quickly, without warmth. Mrs. Sibley. We went into the living room. I offered them tea, but they declined. We don't have much time, Empire said, sitting down on the sofa. Oaks has a meeting at 7. So, what did you want to talk about? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Empire and Oaks exchanged glances. Mom, her daughter began, Oaks and I have been thinking about the future. After the wedding, we want to live in a nice neighborhood. River Heights, Oaks interjected, a prestigious neighborhood with excellent infrastructure. Empire nodded. Yes, but the price is there. In short, it's an expensive pleasure. We can afford a nice apartment, but a house is out of the question for now. I listened, not understanding where they were going with this. And then we thought about your house, Mom, Empire continued. It's too big for you alone. You can't keep up with the maintenance, and we need a house for our family. For your family? I asked. Are you planning to have children? Of course, Empire smiled for the first time that evening. Not now, but in a year or two. I felt a pang of joy. Grandchildren, little feet stomping on these old floorboards. Here's what we propose, Oaks interjected, tapping his fingers on the armrest of his chair. You move into the nursing home Empire mentioned, and we'll take over this house. We've already looked into it, and your pension plus a small supplement from us will cover all your living expenses there. I looked at them, not believing my ears. You want me to give you the house and move into a nursing home? It makes sense, Mom. Empire leaned forward. It will be easier for you there. Medical care, the company of peers, and we can raise your grandchildren here. Everything stays in the family. But this is my house, I said quietly. Mine and Richard's. We bought it and paid the mortgage for 30 years. And now it's yours, Empire nodded. But think about the future. Who will you leave it to? Not me? So why not do it now, when it can help us get settled? I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. When did she become so calculating? So cold? Did I raise her to be like this? I need to think about it, I said finally. Oaks glanced at his watch and stood up. We have to go. Think about it, Mrs. Sibley. We'll come back to this after the engagement. They left as quickly as they had come, leaving me in a daze. I sat in the silence of the living room, trying to make sense of what had happened. The house, I thought. They want my house. Suddenly, Bridget's words echoed in my head. Everyone wants more than they have. I got up and walked to the window. Dusk was falling outside. The neighbor's dog was chasing leaves in the yard across the street. Life went on as usual. I glanced around the living room. Old, cozy, holding our family's history. And suddenly I realized that the house was the only thing I had left, the only thing I could call my own. my last trump card in a game that my own daughter seemed to have started. The 2 weeks after my conversation with Empire and Oaks flew by unnoticed. It was as if I was watching my life from the outside, unable to believe what was happening. My house. They wanted to take my house away, the only place where I felt connected to the past, to Richard. Every day I met with Bridget. We walked in the park, drank coffee in small cafes, and talked about life. More precisely, she did most of the talking, and I listened, about distant countries, unusual people, adventures. Her stories made me feel like a little girl being read a fairy tale. You know, Vermilion, she said one day, as we sat on a bench by the river watching the sun set. Sometimes you have to lose something to find yourself. I looked at her questioningly. When Frank died, I thought my life was over. He wasn't just my husband, he was my compass, my anchor. Without him, I felt lost. But then I realized that it was his absence that finally allowed me to start my own journey. Not his path, not ours together, but mine. Her words touched something deep inside me. Wasn't that how I felt after Richard died? But instead of looking for my own path, I just froze in place, clinging to the past. On the day of Empire's engagement, I wore a dark blue dress that I had bought while Richard was still alive, and a string of pearls, his gift for our 25th anniversary. I even went to the hairdresser to have my hair done, although I usually did it myself. Laurel Gardens turned out to be a fancy restaurant with marble columns and crystal chandeliers. Empire and Oaks greeted guests at the entrance. She in a cream dress that accentuated her slender figure. He in a perfectly tailored suit. "Mom, you came." Empire kissed me on the cheek. "You look good." It was probably the first compliment I had heard from her in a long time. The evening passed in a blur. I sat at the table with other relatives, drank champagne, and smiled when I was supposed to smile. Empire and Oaks accepted congratulations, hugged guests, and looked immensely happy. I looked at my daughter and thought, when did this wall grow between us? When did my love for her turn into fear of disappointing her? When did her love for me turn into condescending impatience? "Mrs. Sibley?" Oak's voice snapped me out of my reverie. He was standing next to my table, holding a glass of champagne. "Have you thought about our offer?" "Oaks, not now," Empire snapped, approaching us. "We agreed to discuss it after the engagement." "I just asked," he shrugged. "We need to know the answer before the wedding so we can plan the renovation." "Renovation?" I asked. "Yes, of course." Oaks took a sip of champagne. "The house needs serious modernization. We're thinking of tearing down a few walls to create an open floor plan. And that awful wallpaper in the hallway?" "It's not wallpaper," I interrupted. "It's hand-painted. Richard did it for our 15th anniversary." Oaks shrugged. "It still looks outdated, and those creaky floors need to be replaced, and the staircase needs to be rebuilt. In short, there's a lot of work to be done." I looked at him, not believing my ears. They didn't just want to take my house. They wanted to destroy everything that made it special. "We'll talk about this later," Empire interjected, giving her fiancé a warning look. "Come on, Oaks. We need to greet the new guests." They left, leaving me in a state of shock. I spent the rest of the evening in a trance, mechanically performing all the rituals. Congratulations, toasts, photos. Inside, I felt a growing sense of something I couldn't quite define. Not quite anger, not quite resentment, but something powerful and unsettling. I returned home after midnight, tired and emotionally drained. I kicked off my shoes, walked into the living room, and sat down in an armchair without turning on the light. Moonlight streamed through the windows, painting silver patterns on the old parquet floor. This parquet, which Oaks so easily wanted to replace, remembered Empire's first steps. It remembered Richard spinning me around in a dance when he got his promotion. It remembered quiet evenings when we sat by the fireplace, reading books and sipping wine. If only the walls could talk, I thought, looking at the painting in the hallway, visible from the living room. Richard had spent 2 weeks on this work, a lace pattern of flowers and leaves, repeating the design on our wedding china. I fell asleep in the armchair, and when I woke up, the sun was already flooding the room with bright light. My back ached, my neck was stiff, but for the first time in a long time, my head was clear. I took a shower, had breakfast, and started cleaning. Not the usual superficial cleaning, but a thorough one. I took the books out of the closet, wiped down every shelf, washed the windows, and polished the silver. It was as if I wanted to remember every corner of the house before. Before what? I didn't know yet. I only knew that I would not give the house to Empire and Oaks. I would not let them tear down the walls Richard had built and paint over his murals. The phone rang at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I jumped. Empire didn't usually call at this time. Had something happened? Hello? Mom, my daughter's voice sounded tense. We need to talk about the house, now. Is it urgent? I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. Yes, very. Oaks and I are planning the budget for the renovation, and we need to know the exact dates. When are you moving into the nursing home? I was silent, not knowing what to say. Mom, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you, I said quietly. But I didn't agree to move into a nursing home, Empire. We were just discussing the possibility. There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. Mom, please don't start. We've made up our minds. I'm getting married and I'm taking your house. Oaks and I have already discussed how we're going to remodel it. I've even hired a designer to work on it. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. I'm taking your house. Not, we'd like to buy your house, or would you consider selling your house to us? No, she was simply taking it, just as she had taken my brooches when I was a teenager, without asking my permission. Something clicked in my head. It clicked and fell into place, like pieces of a puzzle. Empire will never change. She will always consider me just an appendage to her life, something that can be used and pushed aside when the need disappears. And then I remembered Bridget's words. Sometimes you have to lose something to find yourself. What if I lost not my home, but my role as an obedient mother, always ready to sacrifice myself for my daughter? Unexpectedly, I laughed. It wasn't nervous laughter or hysteria. It was laughter of liberation. Daughter, what house are you talking about? I said, still laughing. I sold it 10 days ago and went on a cruise. There was silence, so deep that I could hear my heart beat. What are you talking about? Empire finally said in an icy tone. You couldn't have sold the house? Why not? I continued to smile, even though she couldn't see it. The house belongs to me, and I'm free to do with it as I please. But, but you're here. You're not on a cruise. Good point, I agreed. I came back yesterday, especially for your engagement. I couldn't miss such an event. Mom, stop this nonsense. Empire's voice trembled with anger. You didn't sell the house. You weren't on a cruise. You just, you just, Just what, dear? I asked calmly. Just an old woman who can't live alone and talks nonsense, she blurted out. This only proves that you need supervision. I'm coming over right now, and we're going to have a proper talk. Don't bother, I said, looking out the window at the maple tree we had planted the year she was born. I have an appointment with the realtor in half an hour. We need to settle the last formalities. What realtor? Empire shouted. Mom, I swear, if you really sold the house, then what? I interrupted her. What will you do, Empire? Abandon me? Lock me up in a nursing home against my will? Or maybe finally admit that I'm a grown woman capable of making my own decisions? There was a short beep on the line. Empire hung up. I put down the phone and took a deep breath. My heart was pounding like crazy. My hands were shaking slightly, but I felt strangely calm. For the first time in many years, I had said no to my daughter, and the sky didn't fall. Of course, I didn't sell the house, and I didn't go on a cruise. It was a lie that came spontaneously, out of desperation and anger. But as I said those words, I suddenly realized, why not? Why not sell the house? Why not go on the trip I'd always dreamed of? Why not start living for myself instead of for others? I sat down at my computer, an old laptop that Richard had bought shortly before he died. I opened a search engine and typed in, "How to sell a house in Wichita." A bunch of links popped up on the screen: real estate agencies, private ads, tips on getting ready to sell. I read a few articles, taking notes in my notebook. Then I opened a new tab and typed in, "Cruises for retirees." It was getting dark. Maple leaves rustled outside the window, and the wind picked up, heralding rain. I was sitting at the computer, immersed in studying cruise itineraries, when I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Empire. Of course, she had come. I knew she wouldn't take my word for it. I got up from the table and went to the window. Sure enough, Oak's black SUV was parked outside the house. Empire and her fiancé got out, both looking determined. Empire was saying something, gesturing energetically. Oakes frowned and nodded. I walked away from the window and turned off the computer. A difficult conversation was ahead, but this time everything would be different. This time I wouldn't apologize for living my own way. I wouldn't seek my daughter's approval. I wouldn't be afraid of disappointing her. The doorbell rang, insistently, long. I didn't rush to open it. Let them wait. I went to the bathroom, fixed my hair, and touched up my lipstick. It was my little form of protest, making them wait, showing them that my time belonged to me. The doorbell rang again, even more insistently. Then I heard the key turn in the lock. Empire had a spare key to the house. "For emergencies," she said. "Mom!" Her voice rang out from the hallway. "Where are you?" I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and went out to meet them. Empire stood in the middle of the living room, with her arms crossed over her chest. Oakes loomed behind her, looking extremely uncomfortable. "Hello," I said calmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Don't play dumb," Empire snapped. "What was that nonsense you were saying on the phone? What cruise? What sale of the house?" I looked her straight in the eye and smiled. "You're right. I haven't sold the house yet." Relief washed over her face. "I knew it. You're just upset about something. It happens." "I haven't sold the house," I repeated, "but I'm going to. And yes, I do plan to go on a cruise." Empire stared at me, her mouth open. Oakes took a step forward. "Mrs. Sibley, you can't just—" "I can," I interrupted firmly. "It's my house. I can sell it, rent it out, or even tear it down if I want to." "It's my decision, not yours." Empire's face contorted with anger. Are you doing this to spite me? Because I said I'd take the house? Is this some kind of stupid revenge?" I shook my head. "No, dear. I'm doing this for myself. Because I finally realized I'm 67 years old, but my life isn't over yet, and I want to live the rest of my years the way I want, not the way someone else wants." Empire looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. "Mom, you don't understand what you're saying. Where will you go? How will you live? You can't even pay your own bills." "I'll learn," I said simply. "Your father always said it's never too late to learn." I felt a strange calmness. It was as if all the doubts and fears that had haunted me for years had suddenly dissipated, giving way to clarity. I knew what to do next. I had to start taking action. The next morning, I woke up with the first rays of the sun. I slept surprisingly soundly, without my usual insomnia. My body felt light, and my mind was clear, which I hadn't felt in a long time. After Empire and Oaks left, I stayed up late studying information about selling real estate on the internet. I made a list of realtors with good reviews and calculated the approximate cost of the house based on the prices of similar properties in our area. According to my calculations, the money from the sale would be enough not only for a cruise, but also to buy a small apartment and live comfortably for many years to come. After breakfast, I dialed the number of the first realtor on the list, Premium Homes. A woman with a pleasant voice answered the phone. "Hello, my name is Vermilion Sibley," I introduced myself. "I would like to sell my house and need expert advice." "Of course, Mrs. Sibley," replied the woman. "My name is Sheba Wooten, and I specialize in real estate in the Wichita area. Can we meet today to discuss the details?" We agreed to meet at noon. I was nervous, but not out of fear, rather out of anticipation. For the first time in many years, I was making an important decision on my own, without asking anyone's advice. Sheba Wooten turned out to be a woman in her mid-40s, with short red hair and an attentive gaze. She arrived right on time, wearing a strict suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "What a beautiful house," she said, looking around the living room. "How old is it?" "It was built in the 60s, I replied. "My husband and I bought it 40 years ago." Sheba nodded and made a note in her notebook. "Let me take a look around, and then we'll talk about the price and sales strategy." For the next hour, she walked around the house, took pictures of the rooms, and asked questions about renovations, utilities, and neighbors. I followed her, answering everything honestly and in detail. When the inspection was over, we sat down in the kitchen, and Sheba opened her laptop. "Mrs. Sibley, your house is in excellent condition, especially considering its age. The location is also great. A nice neighborhood, close to schools and parks. I think we can list it for $420,000. The amount made me gasp. Richard and I had bought this house for $65,000 and considered it a huge amount of money. "That much?" "That's the real market price." Sheba nodded. "We may have to lower it a little during the bidding process, but it's worth starting with that amount." We discussed the next steps. We needed to prepare the house for showings, gather documents, and take professional photos. Sheba talked about the sales strategy, potential buyers, and how the bidding process works. "In your case, I recommend not delaying the sale," she said. "The market is currently experiencing a seasonal upturn, and many buyers are looking for family homes. If we do everything right, we can close the deal in a month or a month and a half." I signed a contract with the agency, and Sheba promised to contact me the next day to schedule a photo shoot. When she left, I sat down in a chair and took a deep breath. The wheel had started turning, and I couldn't stop it, nor did I want to. The next item on the agenda was a cruise. I turned on my computer and went back to researching itineraries. The Mediterranean, the Caribbean, Alaska. So many options, so many places I had never seen. In the end, I settled on a 2-week cruise in the Mediterranean. The itinerary included Italy, Greece, and Spain, countries I had read about in books and seen in movies, but never hoped to visit in person. The cost was impressive, almost $8,000, including airfare. In the past, I would have considered such an expense insane, an unaffordable luxury. But now, with the prospect of hundreds of thousands of dollars from the sale of my house, the amount no longer seemed so daunting. I booked the cruise for mid-July, 2.5 months away. That should be enough time to sell the house and prepare for the trip. In the evening, I called Bridget. I told her about my plans, about meeting with the realtor, about booking the cruise. "Vermilion Sibley," she exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you. You're finally doing something for yourself." Her enthusiasm was contagious. We talked for over an hour, discussing the details of the upcoming trip. Bridget gave me lots of practical advice: what to bring, how to prepare for seasickness, which excursions to book in advance. What about Empire? She asked at the end of the conversation. How did she react to your decision? I sighed. Not very well. But that's her problem, not mine. That's the right attitude, Bridget approved. Remember, you don't owe anyone anything, not even your children. After talking to Bridget, I felt a surge of strength. In the morning, I called my banker and made an appointment to discuss the financial aspects of selling the house and traveling abroad. Sheba turned out to be a professional. Just 3 days after signing the contract, the house was photographed, described, and put up for sale. She organized an open house, and dozens of people walked through the rooms, appraising the walls, ceilings, and windows. I was in the living room during the viewing, answering questions from potential buyers. It was strange to see strangers looking at my house as if it were a product in a store, but I forced myself to detach from my emotions and think of the house as an asset that I was converting into a new life. Within a week, 3 offers came in from potential buyers. 2 were below the asking price, but the third, from a couple with 2 children, was exactly what we were hoping for: $420,000. Sheba advised me to accept the offer without negotiating. The price is fair, the buyers are serious, and they have pre-approved financing. I don't think we'll find a better option. I agreed. That same evening, we signed a preliminary purchase agreement, and I received a deposit of 5% of the home's value. Sheba warned me that before the deal was closed, there would still be an appraisal, an inspection, and paperwork to complete. But we had already overcome the main obstacle. The buyers wanted to move in as soon as possible, so we set the closing date for the end of June. I had just over a month to sort through my belongings, pack what I wanted to keep, and find temporary housing before leaving on my cruise. The whole process kept me so busy that I hardly thought about Empire's reaction. I knew that sooner or later she would find out about the sale. Wichita isn't that big of a city, and rumors spread quickly. Sure enough, 10 days after putting the house up for sale, the phone rang. Mom, is it true? Empire's voice was tense. Are you really selling the house? Yes, I replied calmly. I'm already selling it. There's a buyer, and we've signed a preliminary contract. The silence on the line was so deep that I thought the connection had been lost. Empire, are you there? I'll be right there, she snapped and hung up. I knew it was going to be a difficult conversation, but I was ready for it. I was no longer afraid of my daughter's anger, afraid of disappointing her. I felt a strange calm, as if I had finally found my footing after years of wavering. Empire arrived half an hour later, alone, without Ooks. Her face was pale, her eyes burning with an unhealthy glow. How could you? Were her first words when I opened the door. How could you sell the house behind my back? I don't have to consult you about my decisions, I replied, letting her into the house. It's my house, and I have the right to do with it as I see fit. It's our family home, she exclaimed as she entered the living room. I grew up here. All my memories are tied to it. And you're selling it to some strangers. A couple with 2 children, I clarified. They'll be happy here, I'm sure. Empire sank onto the sofa as if her legs couldn't hold her up. Why are you doing this, Mom? To punish me? Because I said I'd take the house? I sat down opposite her and shook my head. No, Empire. I'm doing this because I want to change my life. Because I realize that it belongs to me, not to someone else. I'm selling the house so that I have the means to live the life I want to live. What kind of life? She looked at me in bewilderment. What are you going to do? First, I'm going on a cruise around the Mediterranean. Then, maybe I'll visit other countries. When I come back, I'll buy a small apartment and live the way I want to. Empire looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. You're crazy. What cruise? You're 67 years old. You don't even speak English properly. I'll learn, I shrugged. I'll sign up for classes. My vocabulary isn't bad. I just need practice. Mom, Empire leaned forward. I won't let you make this mistake. You're clearly not yourself. The stress after Dad's death, the loneliness. You need help, not cruises. I laughed. And who's gonna stop me, Empire? You? How? I'm of sound mind, capable of acting, and have the right to dispose of my property. I'll call Uncle Paul and Aunt Izzy, she threatened. They'll talk some sense into you. Paul was Richard's younger brother, and Izzy was my older sister. Both lived in Wichita and sometimes visited me on holidays. Go ahead, I nodded. I'll tell them the same thing I'm telling you. Empire really did call my relatives. That evening, a family council gathered at my house. Paul and his wife Nancy, Izzy, Empire, and me. Oaks wisely stayed out of the family squabble. Vermilion, what's gotten into you? Izzy was always blunt to the point of rudeness. Selling the house where you've lived for 40 years? At your age? What's wrong with my age? I asked calmly. You're 69, 2 years older than me. Do you consider yourself too old to make decisions? Izzy pursed her lips. It's not about age, it's about common sense. Where will you go? How will you live? I'll have over $400,000, I reminded her. That's enough to buy an apartment and live comfortably for the rest of my life. What if you need help? Paul interjected. What if you get sick? Empire can't drive across town every day to take care of you. Empire doesn't take care of me now, I pointed out. She comes once a week for an hour to point out what I'm doing wrong. And by the way, I'm not disabled. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. Richard wouldn't approve, Nancy said quietly. He always said this house was your family nest. It was a low blow, and she knew it. Richard has been dead for 3 years, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. And I think he would want me to be happy, not turn into a living mummy, the guardian of an empty family nest. Mom, Empire stood up and came over to me. You don't understand what you're doing. It's all your friend Bridget. She's messed with your head with her stories about traveling. But you're not her. You've always been a homebody, quiet, calm, comfortable, I finished for her. I've always been comfortable, haven't I? Quiet, obedient, ready to adapt to other people's desires. But you know what? I'm tired of being comfortable. I'm tired of living someone else's life. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at me as if I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. Listen, I said more softly. I appreciate your concern. I really do. But my decision is final. I'm selling the house. I'm going on a cruise. And when I come back, I'll buy an apartment and continue to live the way I see fit. We can't stop you, Paul finally admitted. But when you realize you've made a mistake, don't come crying to us. I won't, I promised with a smile. When everyone left, I sat down in a chair and closed my eyes. The conversation had exhausted me, but inside I felt a strange sense of lightness. It was as if I had thrown off a heavy burden that I had been carrying for years. The house sale was going smoothly. The appraisal confirmed that the price was fair, and the inspection revealed no serious defects. Sheba kept me informed every step of the way, explaining each stage of the process. I began to slowly pack my things, deciding what to take with me to my new life and what to leave behind. Most of the furniture was sold with the house. It was too bulky for the small apartment I dreamed of, but I carefully packed my personal belongings, photos, jewelry, and books into boxes. While sorting through the closets, I came across an old photo album. Richard and I on our wedding day. Tiny empire in my hands. Our first home. a tiny rented apartment where we lived before buying this house. The photos evoked nostalgia, but not sadness. I knew that my memories would stay with me no matter where I lived. I decided to rent an apartment for a month, from the time the house was sold until we left on our cruise. Sheba helped me find a suitable option, a small but cozy studio not far from the city center. Empire didn't call for over a week after our conversation, and I was glad about that. I needed to gather my thoughts and prepare for the coming changes. When she finally called, her voice sounded strangely muffled. "Mom, I want to apologize for my reaction," she said without preamble. I was shocked, but now I understand that this is your decision and I have to respect it. I was so surprised that I didn't know how to respond right away. "Thank you, Empire. That means a lot to me. I just want you to be happy," she continued. "And if selling the house and this cruise will make you happy, well, I'll support you." Something in her voice sounded false, but I didn't want to ruin the moment with my suspicions. "I appreciate that, dear. I really do." "When is the closing?" she asked in a matter-of-fact tone. "At the end of June, the 28th, and the cruise, July 15th. 2 weeks between selling the house and the cruise. Where will you live?" "I rented an apartment for a month." "Nonsense," Empire cut in. "Why waste money? You can stay with us and Oaks. We have plenty of room." Now I knew for sure that something was wrong. Empire had never offered to let me stay with her, even for a day. "Thanks, but I've already put a deposit down on the apartment, and it'll be more convenient for me this way. All my things will be close at hand, and I'll be able to prepare for the trip in peace." "As you wish," I heard tension in her voice. I just wanted to help. We talked a little more about trivial things, and then she hung up. I sat there, holding the phone in my hand, thinking about my daughter's strange behavior. First anger and accusations, now sudden support and an offer to stay with her. Something didn't add up, but I didn't want to waste energy trying to figure out her motives. I had a new life ahead of me, and I was going to enjoy every moment of it. The day of departure came suddenly, even though I had been preparing for it for several months. The sale of the house went smoothly, and I had been living in a rented apartment for 2 weeks, sorting through my belongings and preparing for the trip. And finally, the day came when I was to board a plane and embark on a new life. Bridget, who had already returned to California, called every day with last-minute advice. "Don't forget the plug adapter. Take motion sickness pills, even if you don't think you'll need them. Be sure to buy travel insurance." I followed all her recommendations, while at the same time surprising myself. Was this really me, Vermilion Sibley, a quiet housewife from Wichita, going on a Mediterranean cruise? Empire insisted on driving me to the airport. She was unusually quiet the whole way, only occasionally glancing at me strangely. I didn't try to strike up a conversation. There was still unspoken tension between us after that argument. At the airport, she gave me an awkward hug. "Call me when you arrive in Rome." "Sure," I nodded, even though I already knew I wouldn't. I needed a complete break from my old life, at least for these 2 weeks. The plane, Rome airport, the transfer to the port of Civitavecchia, everything merged into a kaleidoscope of new impressions. I felt a slight fear mixed with excitement when I first saw the cruise ship Mediterranea. The huge white ship, sparkling in the sun, seemed unreal, as if it had come out of a science fiction movie. The cabin I had booked was small but cozy, with a balcony overlooking the sea. I unpacked my things, took a shower, and got dressed for the welcome dinner. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I was amazed at how much I had changed over the past few months. The wrinkles were still there, as were the gray hairs, but there was a sparkle in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. I felt younger, more energetic, more confident. The restaurant on the ship was strikingly luxurious. Crystal chandeliers, snow-white tablecloths, waiters in elegant suits. I was seated at a table where two middle-aged couples and an elderly man in his 70s were already sitting. Everyone introduced themselves, but I immediately forgot their names. Too many new faces, too much excitement. The elderly man's name was Hurley Morrow. He was tall with a neat gray beard and attentive blue eyes. When he smiled and greeted me, I had a strange feeling that we had known each other for a long time. "First cruise?" he asked when the waiter brought the menu. "Yes," I admitted, "and my first trip abroad." "Oh, then you are at the beginning of an amazing journey." He raised his glass of wine. "To new horizons." I raised my glass, feeling warmth spread through me, not from the wine, but from this simple gesture of understanding. Dinner passed in relaxed conversation. The couples, Glenn and Nora Pinkney, Francis and Betty Lawrence, turned out to be experienced travelers, and they talked about the countries they had visited and their impressions. Hurley was mostly silent, occasionally interjecting with witty remarks that made everyone laugh. After dinner, the couples went to the evening show, while Hurley and I decided to take a walk on the deck. The night air was warm and salty, and the stars seemed closer than ever. "So, what brought you on this cruise, Vermilion?" Hurley asked, leaning on the railing. "If it's not a secret, of course." I wasn't going to confide in a stranger, but something in his voice, in his calm gaze, made me want to trust him. "I decided to change my life," I said simply. "I sold the house I'd lived in for 40 years and decided to see the world while I still had time." Hurley nodded as if it were the most natural decision in the world. "What about your family? Did they support you?" I laughed. "Let's just say my daughter wasn't thrilled. She was planning to take my house for herself." "Ah," Hurley smiled. "A classic story. Children often forget that parents are not just parents, but people with their own desires and dreams." "Do you have children?" I asked. "A son and a daughter," he nodded. "Both are adults now, with their own families. They live in different states, and we see each other a couple of times a year on holidays." He paused, looking out at the dark sea. "My wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. After she died, I sat at home for a year or two, just existing. And then I realized that she wouldn't have wanted that. Alice always said that life is too short to spend it on regrets." "My husband died 3 years ago," I said quietly. "Cancer, too." We stood silently, looking at the stars, united by this shared experience of loss. No words were needed to understand each other. The first day of the cruise began with a stop in Naples. I signed up for an excursion to Pompeii, an ancient city buried under a layer of volcanic ash. The tour guide, a young Italian woman with a melodious accent, told us about the life of the city, its sudden end, and how archaeologists reconstructed its history from the artifacts they found. I walked along the ancient streets, looked at the frescoes preserved on the walls of houses, at the imprints of the bodies of residents in the solidified lava, and I thought about how fragile human life is, how important it is to live it fully, without putting anything off until later. Hurley was also on this tour. We stayed together, discussed what we saw, and shared our impressions. In the evening, when we returned to the ship, we sat in a cafe on the upper deck, drank wine, and talked about life, loss, and new beginnings. "You know, Vermilion," Hurley said as we watched the sunset, "I think we're alike. We've both lost loved ones, and we've both decided to start over despite our age." I nodded. "Yes, only you started earlier, and I let others decide for me for too long." "It's never too late to change course." He pointed to the horizon, where the sky merged with the sea in a single line. "See? It seems like there's nothing beyond, only emptiness. But we know that beyond the horizon lies a whole world. You just have to decide to sail forward." The following days were filled with new impressions. Rome with its majestic ruins and Baroque fountains, Florence with its galleries and cathedrals, Nice with its azure coastline and elegant promenades. Every day I discovered something new, and every evening I returned to the ship overflowing with emotions. Hurley became my constant companion. We went on excursions together, had dinner together, and sat together on the deck in the evenings, looking at the stars. It was easy with him. He didn't demand constant conversation. He knew how to appreciate silence. He never interrupted when I shared my impressions. Gradually, I told him the whole story of my relationship with my daughter, about her attempts to take the house, about the family council that tried to bring me to my senses. You know what's most surprising? I said as we sat in a bar after a long day in Barcelona. All my life I was afraid of disappointing others. My parents, my husband, my daughter. I always tried to be agreeable, not to cause problems, to live up to expectations. And only now, at 67, have I realized that the only person I really disappointed was myself. Hurley thoughtfully twirled a glass of whiskey in his hands. I think many people live like that, out of inertia, out of habit, out of fear. It's easier to go with the flow than to row against it. But at some point, you realize that the current is not taking you where you need to go. Yes, I nodded. That's exactly how I feel. It's as if I've been going with the flow my whole life, and now I've suddenly picked up the oars. I hardly checked my phone the whole time. I only turned it on in the evening, before bed, when the ship had Wi-Fi. Empire called every day and left messages. At first, they were concerned. Mom, why aren't you answering? Mom, are you okay? Then they became annoyed. Mom, I know you're getting my messages. It's just disrespectful not to answer your daughter's calls. And then frankly angry. How could you do this to us? We're worried and you don't care. I read these messages with a strange detachment, as if they were addressed not to me, but to some other Vermilion, the old one who always put the desires of others above her own. The new Vermilion felt no guilt for enjoying life. On the 8th day of the cruise, when Hurley and I were returning from an excursion in Athens, I found 20 missed calls and a long, angry message from Empire on my phone. She wrote that I was an irresponsible, selfish old woman, that I had ruined her plans for the future, that because of my whims, she and Oakes would not be able to buy their dream home. In the past, such words would have hurt me deeply. I would have cried, blamed myself, and thought about how to fix everything. But now I just turned off my phone and put it in my bag. Problems? Hurley asked, noticing my movement. No, I shook my head. Just a reminder of my past life. That evening, we had dinner in the ship's special restaurant, elegant, with white tablecloths and silver cutlery. Hurley insisted on ordering champagne. What shall we drink to? I asked when the waiter filled our glasses. To the new Vermilion, Hurley smiled, raising his glass. To the woman who wasn't afraid to start her life over. We clinked glasses, looking into each other's eyes. Something had changed between us. Some invisible line had been crossed. We were no longer just random travel companions sharing a table in a restaurant. We were, what? Friends? Or something more? After dinner, we walked on the deck. The night was warm, the sea calm, the stars reflected in the dark water, creating the illusion of infinity. Vermilion. Hurley stopped and turned to me. I know we've only known each other for a week, but I feel like I've known you my whole life. With you, I feel alive, for the first time in 5 years. I looked at him, not knowing what to say. There was so much warmth and sincerity in his eyes that it took my breath away. Hurley, He took my hand in his, gently, as if afraid of scaring me away. I'm not asking you to promise anything. I just want you to know that this week has been the happiest I've had in a long time. and I hope that when the cruise is over, our friendship will continue. I squeezed his hand. I hope so too. During the last days of the cruise, Hurley and I were inseparable. We explored the islands of Greece, swam in azure bays, and ate fresh fish in small taverns by the sea. We talked about books, music, and trips we would like to take. We talked about the past with warmth, but without regret. We talked about the future with hope, but without specific plans. On the evening of the last day, as the ship was returning to Rome, we sat on the balcony of my cabin watching the sunset. Hurley talked about his house in Portland, the garden he planted after his wife died, and the collection of antique maps he had been gathering all his life. "You must come visit," he said, looking at the horizon. "Portland is beautiful in the fall. The maple leaves turn bright red, and the air smells of apples and smoke. We could walk in the woods and pick mushrooms. I know some great places." I imagined the scene, Hurley and I walking through the autumn woods, picking mushrooms, returning to his house, cooking dinner, sitting by the fireplace with a glass of wine. And the image didn't scare me, as it would have just a couple of months ago. "I'd like that," I said quietly. "I'd really like that." Hurley took my hand and squeezed it gently. We sat there without saying a word, watching the sun sink into the sea, painting the sky and water in shades of gold and purple. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how my life had changed in those few months, about the house I had sold, about my daughter, with whom my relationship seemed irretrievably damaged, about Hurley, who had appeared in my life so suddenly and fit into it so naturally. I thought about how long I had allowed others, my parents, my husband, my daughter, to determine who I was and how I should live, how I tried to be good, a good daughter, a good wife, a good mother, and how, in the process, I lost my true self. In the morning, when the ship docked at the port of Civitavecchia, Hurley and I exchanged contact information. He was going straight to the airport. His flight to New York was in the afternoon. My flight to Chicago wasn't until the evening, with a layover in Wichita. "I'll call you as soon as I get home," he said, hugging me goodbye. "And we'll discuss your visit to Portland." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Strange, but saying goodbye to someone I had known for only 2 weeks was harder than I could have imagined. At the airport, I turned on my phone and found a dozen more angry messages from Empire. The last one had been sent a few hours ago. "I hope you're happy with your new life. Don't call me when you get back. I don't want to deal with someone who betrays their family so easily." I read the message several times, trying to feel the pain, guilt, regret, all the emotions my daughter's words usually evoked in me. But I felt nothing but a strange calm. I wasn't going to call Empire when I got back. I wasn't going to make excuses, apologize, or try to repair our relationship at any cost, as I had done before. If she wanted to be part of my life, the new life of Vermilion Sibley, she would have to accept me as I was, with all my decisions, desires, and dreams. And if not, well, so be it. Returning to Wichita after the cruise was a strange experience for me. The city remained the same streets, the same buildings, the same slow pace of life, but I came back a different person. It was as if part of me had remained in those ancient cities by the Mediterranean Sea, in those azure bays, on that snow-white ship, and, of course, with Hurley. I spent the first week in the same rented apartment where I had stayed before my departure. I sorted through the photos I had taken during my trip, remembering every day, every excursion, every conversation with Hurley. We talked on the phone every day, he in Portland, I in Wichita. The distance did not interfere with our communication. Rather, it made it more intense. We told each other about our days, shared our thoughts, and made plans for the future. Have you started looking for an apartment yet? He asked during one of our calls. Yes, I looked at a few options online, I replied. I'm meeting with a realtor tomorrow to look at 3 apartments in different parts of the city. Which area do you like best? I think Riverside. It's not too noisy, but it's not as sleepy as where I used to live. There are nice parks, small cafes, and a library nearby. Sounds great, Hurley said with a smile in his voice. Once you've decided on an apartment, maybe you'll think about taking a trip to Portland. Fall is already starting, and soon the maple trees will be especially beautiful. I smiled in response, even though he couldn't see it. I'll definitely think about it. First, I need to settle into my new place, and then I can travel. Empire hadn't called since I got back. I knew she knew I was back. Wichita isn't that big of a city. Rumors spread fast. But she kept her word and didn't get in touch. I didn't try to call her first. I needed time to figure out my feelings toward my daughter, what kind of relationship I wanted to have with her in the future. The real estate agent I met showed me 3 apartments in different parts of Riverside. The first one was too small, the second was on a noisy street, and the third was exactly what I had imagined. A bright 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor of a brick building, with large windows overlooking the park, a cozy kitchen, and a small balcony. It was recently renovated, the realtor explained, showing me the modern bathroom. The previous owners moved to another city and completely renovated the apartment before selling it. I walked through all the rooms, imagining how I would arrange the furniture, what curtains I would hang, what paintings would be on the walls. This space was much smaller than my previous home, but it seemed exactly what my new home should be: compact, functional, modern. I'll take it, I said, looking out the window at the park where children were playing and dog walkers were strolling. How long will it take to complete the paperwork? With full payment, about 2 weeks, replied the realtor. We need to check the documents, prepare the purchase agreement, and register the transaction. 2 weeks later, I became the owner of a new apartment. The money from the sale of my old house was enough to buy the new one, furnish it completely, and still have enough left over to live comfortably for many years, travel, and indulge in the little pleasures that I had been deprived of for so long. It took almost a month to furnish the new apartment. I chose furniture, textiles, and dishes, everything that would make the space mine, reflecting my new essence. No heavy curtains, no bulky wardrobes, no dusty knickknacks. Light walls, light curtains, a minimum of things, only those that are really necessary or bring joy. I took only a few things from my old home: photographs, books, jewelry given to me by Richard, his pocket watch, which he loved so much. Everything else remained in the past, like the house itself. Hurley called every day, asking about the settling in process, giving advice, cheering me up. We planned my visit to Portland for the end of October, when I would be completely settled in my new place and the maple trees would be at the height of their autumn splendor. I've already made a list of places I want to show you, he said. Washington Park, the Rose Garden, the Japanese Garden, and of course, we'll go to the coast. The scenery there is incredible, especially at this time of year. I listened to him, imagining these places, imagining us together, walking in parks, sitting on the beach, watching the waves. And this future did not frighten me, but filled me with anticipation and joy. In early October, when I had already completely settled into my new apartment, an unexpected call came. Empire. I stared at the phone screen, not sure if I wanted to answer. After a few seconds of hesitation, I accepted the call. Mom? Her voice sounded unusually uncertain. It's me. Hi, Empire, I said neutrally. How are you? Fine, she paused. I heard you bought an apartment in Riverside. Yes, I confirmed. A month ago. And how do you like it there? I love it. It's bright, quiet and close to the park. Another pause. I could almost hear her searching for words. Mom, I wanted to apologize for those messages I sent you during the cruise. I was upset. I didn't understand your actions. But now, I want to mend our relationship. I was silent, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to believe in the sincerity of her apology, but another part remembered all those years of manipulation, control, and neglect. Oaks and I would like to invite you to dinner, she continued after a pause, to show you our new home. We recently bought a townhouse on the north side. A townhouse? I asked. I thought you wanted a bigger house. Well, our plans have changed a bit, she said, her voice sounding tense. After the wedding, there were some financial adjustments. Oh, I see. They didn't have enough money for the luxurious house they had dreamed of. So now Empire had decided to restore her relationship with me, perhaps hoping for financial assistance. When are you planning this dinner? I asked, deciding not to voice my guesses. Maybe this Saturday, around 6 in the evening? I agreed, albeit with some internal resistance. I needed to see my daughter, talk to her face to face, understand whether she had really changed or was just pursuing her goals. On Saturday, I put on a simple but elegant dress, light makeup, and a pearl necklace, a gift from Richard. The Empire and Oxa townhouse was located in a new neighborhood on the northern outskirts of the city, a modern complex of identical two-story houses with small plots of land. Empire opened the door as soon as I rang the bell. She looked tense but tried to smile. Mom, come in. She hugged me awkwardly. You look wonderful. The cruise did you good. I entered the house. Inside, everything was new, sterile, as if from a catalog. White walls, gray furniture, chrome details. Not a single personal item, nothing that reflected the owner's individuality. Oakes came out of the kitchen, drying his hands with a towel. Mrs. Sibley, he nodded. Welcome. Thank you. I looked around the living room. It's very modern. Yes, that's the style we wanted, Empire said quickly. Minimalism is trendy right now. Dinner took place in a strange atmosphere. We talked about the weather, the local news, Empire and Oakes's work. We avoided any mention of past quarrels, the house, the cruise. It was as if we had tacitly agreed to a truce, the terms of which included ignoring everything that had happened in recent months. After dessert, a store-bought cheesecake, Empire finally got down to business. Mom, Oakes and I wanted to talk to you about something important. She glanced at her husband, as if seeking support. I'm listening, I said, already guessing where this was going. Oakes cleared his throat. The thing is, Mrs. Sibley, after the wedding, we ran into some financial difficulties. The real estate market changed, interest rates rose. We weren't able to buy the house we had hoped for. And on top of that, Empire continued, the company is undergoing restructuring. My job is at risk of being cut. I remained silent, waiting to see where they were going with this. We thought, Empire continued after a pause, maybe you could help us? Just a little. Just so we can get back on our feet, pay off the loan on the townhouse, and start saving for a real house. How much do you want? I asked bluntly. Empire and Oakes exchanged glances. 100,000 would be ideal, Oakes said in a businesslike tone. We'd pay it back, of course, in time. 100,000, a quarter of the proceeds from the sale of my house, money I had planned to spend on travel, on new experiences, on the life I had always dreamed of. No, I said calmly. What? Empire looked as if she couldn't believe her ears. I said no, I repeated firmly. I'm not giving you any money. But Mom, her voice took on a familiar tone of indignation. We're family. I'm your daughter. How can you refuse to help us? Easy. I pushed away my plate of half-eaten cheesecake. You wanted to take my house without paying a cent for it. You tried to send me to a nursing home against my will. You sent me angry messages when I finally decided to live for myself. And now you expect me to give you some of the money from the sale of the house you wanted so badly for free? Empire paled. I apologized for those messages. I was upset. Apology accepted, I nodded. But there will be no money. Oakes rose from the table. Mrs. Sibley, I understand your feelings, but think about the future, about the grandchildren you could have, about the family legacy. I smiled. Oakes, let's not play these games. You want my money, I don't want to give it to you. It's that simple. You're just a selfish old woman, Empire exclaimed, jumping up from the table. You squander money on cruises, on a new apartment, but you refuse to help your own daughter. Yes, I spend my money on things that bring me joy, I agreed, also standing up. And you know what's most surprising? I have every right to do so. I headed for the exit. Empire followed me, continuing to talk about family duty, my callousness, how I had changed. I listened to her, but I didn't hear her. These accusations no longer had any power over me. Goodbye, Empire, I said, opening the front door. When you're ready to talk to me without trying to manipulate me, without demands and accusations, give me a call. I'll always be happy to see my daughter, but not the woman who sees me only as a wallet or a burden. I walked out without looking back and got into the taxi I had called in advance. Inside, there was a strange calm. Not anger, not resentment, but simply the understanding that some relationships cannot be repaired, at least not alone. At home, I immediately called Hurley. I told him about my meeting with my daughter, about her attempt to get money, about my refusal. You did the right thing, he said after a pause. You can't let others take advantage of you, even if those others are your children. I know, I sighed. It's just sad that our relationship has come to this. Her attempts at manipulation, my refusals and boundaries. Maybe she'll change over time, Hurley suggested. She'll realize she's lost her mother and want to rebuild a real, sincere relationship. Maybe, I agreed without much conviction. Or maybe not. Either way, it's her choice. I've made mine. We talked for a long time about my upcoming visit to Portland, the places we would visit, the books we had recently read, the movies we had seen. And gradually, the bitterness of meeting my daughter dissolved, giving way to anticipation of new adventures. The next day, I booked a plane ticket to Portland for October 18th. Hurley promised to meet me at the airport and show me his city, his home, his life. And I was ready to show him the new me, Vermilion, who had finally learned to live for herself without looking back at the expectations of others. The next 2 weeks were spent in pleasant bustle. I chose what to take with me to Portland, planned outfits for different occasions, bought a warm scarf and gloves. October in Oregon, according to Hurley, could be quite chilly. I read guidebooks, studied the city's history, and made a list of places I wanted to visit. Empire hadn't called since that evening. I wasn't waiting for her call. I knew it would be a while before she realized she couldn't manipulate me anymore, if she ever did. The day before I left for Portland, I was walking in a park near my new apartment. Autumn had already painted the leaves gold and crimson, and the air was crisp and cool. I walked along the path strewn with leaves and thought about how my life had changed over the past 6 months. From a quiet, submissive woman living in the past, I had become someone who makes plans, travels, meets new people, and sets healthy boundaries. I learned to say no, to choose what brings me joy, and to value myself and my time. At home, I packed my suitcase, checked my tickets and documents, and set the timer on the coffee maker so I could have a cup of fresh coffee in the morning before leaving. And I went to bed thinking that tomorrow a new adventure would begin, one of many that still await me. Because at 67, life doesn't end. It's just beginning if you let it. And I finally let it.